I just got done watching season 5 of Better Call Saul, and I want to talk about it. And wow, have there been some crazy intense moments throughout the season. And I'm going to give a review of seasons 3 through 5 because I already talked about seasons 1 and 2 on my channel already. And then I want to go ahead and give a deep dive of like the characters, the events that have happened so far, and then I want to give my predictions for what's going to happen in the final season, season 6. I'm your host, Seb, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment down below what your favorite season of Better Call Saul was and why. But let's go ahead and dive into this. Before we go any further, I want to go ahead and make a spoiler warning because I'm definitely going to be diving into the events that have happened. And so in case you haven't seen the show, I definitely recommend going to watch it and then coming back and seeing this review. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. The first thing I want to talk about is Jimmy. And it's because I think Jimmy had like such a great character arc up until the end of season 3. And then in season 4 and season 5, it seems like he's almost kind of reverted as a character. Like he hasn't been improving. He's actually like deproved. And it all started like at the end of season 2 where, you know, he makes that honest confession to Chuck just because he doesn't want Chuck to stop being a lawyer. But then we find out that Chuck did it all to like deceive Jimmy and get this tape. That way he can try and disbar Jimmy. Hence, the most famous episode of the show, Chicanery. In Chicanery, the two of them are fighting for disbarment and Jimmy. Jimmy obviously trying to defend that he deserves to be a lawyer, while Chuck is trying to make sure that Jimmy can never be a lawyer again. And in it, at the conclusion of the episode, we get Jimmy planting a fake battery in Chuck's chest, and he invites Chuck's ex-wife to the briefing. And then Chuck loses it, and he says a lot of things about Jimmy. But at the end of it all, it makes the court only give Jimmy like a 1-year disbarment where he has to reapply to become a lawyer. And that was the end of it. And then we get to the end of the season where Chuck is just completely down on his luck. And he tells Jimmy that he actually has never cared for him. He's never loved him. And that he doesn't really care for him at all. And that was really sad. And that was really emotional. And then 30 minutes later, we see that Chuck is like on the brink of it all. And he ends up kicking a fire in his house and burning himself alive. And it was really sad to see. And just a horrible ending. And then we start off season 4 where Jimmy is like not grieving. He doesn't care because Chuck just told him that, you know, I don't fucking hate, or like, I don't fucking love you, dude. Like, I hate you. And it's just really sad to see like Jimmy's just not processing the grief correctly. And everybody around him is, you know, trying to be supportive and comforting, but I guess he just doesn't want it. And it gets to the point where him and Kim have an argument about it because Kim is wanting him to like care a little bit more and he isn't. We see that his relationship with him and Kim comes down to like a crashing point towards the end of season 4 where he's trying to fight for getting his lawyership back and it doesn't go well. And then he crashes out on Kim and says a lot of horrible things to her. She says some mean things back to him. And then they, you know, have like a little bit of a falling out and then they come back together and say, you know, like they didn't really apologize, but they were like, okay, like let's put it past us and let's try to move forward and try to make you become a lawyer again. And it's just really sad to see because time and time again, Jimmy just keeps hurting the people around him. And at first it was Chuck and then it was Kim. And so it's just crazy to see like his progression. And then at the end of season 5, Jimmy goes on this money hunt for Lalo. And at the end of it all, Lalo comes to Jimmy's apartment because Jimmy was told by Mike to lie about the events surrounding the money exchange because Jimmy was ambushed by that one cartel gang, and then Mike had to come and save him and then get the money to Lalo. But he couldn't let Lalo know about that because Mike works for Gus and they have a whole plan for Lalo and they're trying to get him out of the United States so we can go back to Mexico and that way Gus can take over the operations. And so Lalo realizes that Jimmy had lied to him, and so he comes and he threatens Jimmy and Kim with a gun, and Kim ends up just saving Jimmy's ass by telling Lalo that he needs to chill out and that it's really sad that he can only trust Saul with his money, and the fact that he can't trust any of his goons or henchmen to like go get it for him is really pathetic. And the fact that he has to keep traumatizing and trying to manipulate Jimmy, he should feel ashamed for that. And so it ends up working. Lalo ends up leaving and then he ends up going back to his place. But the amount of danger that he has put the people around him and the amount of like lack of care for them as well is just so sad to see, especially with how it comes crashing down with him and Kim towards the end of season 5. But all that to say, I'm really excited to see how season 6 ends with Jimmy. I hope his character progression can take a turn for the best, and we'll have to see about that. So then that brings me to my next character, Kim. And as the story keeps progressing, she becomes more and more of a main character. And she's super important because she's Jimmy's right-hand person, you know. they literally get married in the middle of season 5, and I thought that was wonderful. It was a really heartfelt scene, especially just because of how season 4 went for them. Like, the relationship was super rocky, and at moments I thought that they were gonna fall out, and I really believed that it was gonna happen sooner, just because I know that in Breaking Bad, Jimmy never really references Kim, and so I know that they're not gonna make it to the end of the show, or at least I don't think they will. And so I really thought that the falling out was gonna happen earlier, just based on how the events went. But Kim has stuck by Jimmy, and I think she's amazing for that, because Jimmy is not an easy person to stick by. And I almost feel bad for her, because I do wish that she has better. And a lot of people in the show end up telling her, like, oh, you could end up doing so much better. Or they say, like, Jimmy, really? That you're shooting that high above your league? And I mean, it's a testament to who Kim is for, staying by Jimmy's side. But I guess it also means that she doesn't have very many people to go to. And I'm glad that she's able to continue trusting Jimmy, but it's also really sad because keeps breaking that trust. And that's the whole reason why they end up getting married, is because Jimmy has all these different plans, and they try to go after one of Kim's employers and try to make the worst for him, because they don't really enjoy his company and they don't really like him. And because of it, Jimmy ends up going off script, and Kim gets really mad at him for that, and then they end up getting married. That way they couldn't be testified against each other. But it's really sad to see, because towards the end of season 5, you can see Kim is also regressing as a character, because now she's wanting to get into more of the Slip and Jimmy type of acts. And at the end of season 5, her and Jimmy are concocting a plan to go and sabotage Hamlin in some sort of way. And so I hope that whatever ends up happening, it never gets to some crazy legal trouble, because I actually really like Kim as a character and I want the best for her. But her character arc right now is just taking a turn for the worst. So then the next character I want to talk about is Mike. And the really big thing with Mike right now is that he's been involved in Gus's chicken shop, Los Pollos Hermanos, and he's been acting as a security guard on the paycheck. That way he can get paid. But basically, since his tenure has been done with his money being clean to him, he's now stayed with Gus and helped them run security operations, where basically they were just building that underground lab that ended up being for Walter White and Jesse in the Breaking Bad universe. That lab that they worked underground, that's the lab that they ended up building. And it was really sad to see, because Mike ended up getting really familiar with the German crew, and especially their leader. His name was Werner. But Werner just kind of went a little bit crazy. He just got out of control. He went on like a crazy manhunt, or made them go on a manhunt for him. And then Lalo came into the picture, who I'll talk about later, and ended up just leaving a really bad trail of eggs. And Lalo ended up trying to pick up the pieces and try to make Gus look really bad and let the cartel know, because he does not like Gus. But in the end of it all, Mike ended up having to kill his friend Werner because Gus couldn't trust him anymore. And throughout seasons 4 and the beginning of 5, we see that Mike is, really upset and he's hurting a little bit. And to see him have to kill Werner, he's not agreeing with Gus's actions. And I think that's really great, because the one thing we know about Mike is that even though he does all of these terrible things, he still has kind of a moral compass. And he tells Gus, some of these things that you're doing doesn't sit right with me. And Gus is just like ridiculously evil in this show, because he just does not gaff. He tells Mike, like, hey, I'm your boss. I'm giving you the orders. Like, you do as I tell you to do. And Mike is just, he shrugs it off. He tells him, I don't agree, but he does it anyways. And so maybe there's something to say to that about how Mike really is as a person. I think it's really cool seeing his arc. And I wonder how it's going to end, because we know that he ends up being the henchman for Gus all throughout this time, all the way through Breaking Bad, all the way to his death in Breaking Bad. And so I really want to know how his character ends up being in season 6. I hope he just starts to become more of like a influential figure in Gus's life, instead of just being the guy taking orders. I hope Gus starts to listen a little bit to Mike and offering him some of the things that he wants in order to keep him by his side. And then, of course, our final two characters that I want to talk about are Nacho and Lalo. And the reason for that is just because Nacho has been made Gus's right-hand man ever since he drugged, or I guess he didn't drug Salamanca, but Hector. He ended up swapping out his pills so that way he couldn't get like the right heart pills, and it put him in a wheelchair. And Gus knew about that, and so because of that, he's been blackmailing Nacho into making him follow his orders. And he's told him that if for some reason he defies them, he has a gun ready to go and kill his dad. And so it's a really hard position for Nacho to be in, because he doesn't want his dad to die because of his own actions, but because of it, he's been an informant for Lalo. And now, who's Lalo? Lalo is Tuco's uncle, I believe, or maybe his cousin. I don't know, but Lalo is a Salamanca, and he's part of the Salamanca family, and he came to see operations since Hector went down and was put in a wheelchair. Nacho has been in charge, and so Lalo came upstairs to see what's going on, how's my money being ran, and like, can I make an influence on these people? But Gus doesn't like him because Gus doesn't like the Salamancas and vice versa. And so because of it, he's had Nacho be an informant and tell him everything that Lalo's planning on doing to try and be one step ahead of him. We get to the end of season 5 where Lalo ends up going back to Mexico, and he brings Nacho with him, and he shows Nacho his whole family, and he says, I want you to meet my boss. I want you to maybe start taking charge of things and getting into place, because he's starting to trust Nacho and he wants him to become the head honcho guy. But somehow Gus manages to get a connection in, and they call Nacho and tell him to unlock his back door at 3 a.m. because that's when they were going to come and try to kill Lalo. And so Nacho ends up conveniently finding an excuse for Lalo to leave him alone for a minute, and then he opens the door, and then the squad comes in to try and kill Lalo. Unfortunately, though, Lalo ends up living through it, and he ends up killing everybody who came and tried to murder his family and murder him, and in the end of it all, they murdered everybody but Lalo. And it was really sad to see, because a lot of these characters that ended up dying, we'd only known them for like 5 minutes, but we knew that none of them were involved with the cartel. Some of them were just bystanders, innocent, and it was sad because we got to see all of them murdered. And then at the end of it all, we know that Nacho is on the run, and Lalo knows that Nacho probably planted this because he sees everybody's body except for Nacho's. And so it doesn't take like more than 2 pebbles to know that, hey, maybe Nacho isn't the guy who I thought he was. And so I'm going to make a pretty big prediction about that later on. So the first prediction that I'm going to make is that I hope Nacho gets a happy ending. It's a Vince Gilligan show, so it probably won't. Everybody ends up dying anyways, but I'm really hoping that he gets it here, because I think that Lalo will be more focused on Gus and try to go after Gus and, make damages to him and kind of just forget about Nacho and it all. Or maybe he finds out that Nacho was being forced to do this, and so he goes easy on him. But whatever the case, I hope Nacho ends up getting away and lives with his dad, and that he ends up having a happy family. We'll see if I'm right about that. I don't know if I will be. I don't think I will be, but I'm really hoping for it. The second prediction that I want to make is that I don't think Jimmy and Kim will end up together. And I already mentioned it earlier before, but in Breaking Bad, I don't remember him ever mentioning Kim. And so because of that, it leads me to think that whatever happens at the end of the season before it ends up going to like the normal time, I'm sure that they will have a huge falling out. And because of it, he won't end up getting to see her for a long time. And I guess I forgot to mention that I know a few spoilers about the show. I know it's been out for a while. But the only ones that I really know of is that the end of Better Call Saul ties into the ending events of Breaking Bad. And then I know that Jimmy ends up going to trial for the events of Breaking Bad. And so those are the only 2 spoilers that I know. I've been really trying to stay away from everything. And so if I get any of these right, I promise I didn't look it up. Like I guess I just know ball. I'm sure that Jimmy and Kim will not end up together. And I think that at the very end of the show, before whatever happens at trial, I think that they will have a final moment where Jimmy and Kim will have like a reconvening and maybe, at least end things on a good note between the 2 of them. But I don't think that they end up becoming that happy couple, which I would really hope that they would become, but I don't think it will happen. And then my final prediction is that both Lalo and Howard will have horrible things happen to them, because at the end of season 5, Kim and Jimmy are scheming, and Gus and Mike are scheming about killing Lalo. And so while I don't think Jimmy and Kim are going to kill Howard, I think he'll end up getting disbarred, and then I think that Lalo might actually end up dying. Hence, again, why we don't hear about it. But I think regardless of whatever ends up happening to Lalo and Nacho, Jimmy will never know, and nobody else will ever know. Hence why when Jimmy got taken by Walter and Jesse, he was like, oh, did Ignacio or Lalo send you? And I think that's because he never gets to hear from them ever again after this. Or maybe if he does, it'll be when they're like alive and in good spirits, but he'll never know what ends up happening to them. And so because of that, I think that it's very likely that Lalo will end up dying, and then also I think it's very likely that whatever happens to Howard ends up going through. And maybe that's the reason why Jimmy gets caught. Maybe Howard has this grudge on him all these years and sends people to go up and find him. That's it for my predictions, and that's it for my review. It's a little bit longer video than usual, but I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know if you guys agree or disagree with some of my points. I'm really excited to see how this show ends up. I've been watching it for a while now, and I gotta say that I really love it. All the excitement and the emotions that it's making me feel have been, very real to me. And usually a show doesn't get me feeling this pumped up, but as I'm watching it, I can't help but think like, oh no, like Jimmy, like why are we doing that? Or being like, Jimmy, come on, Jimmy, you got this, or rooting for Kim or rooting for Mike or whoever it is. Like I care about these characters and I really do want to see the story end up well for them. Again, like I said, it's a Vince Gilligan show, so it definitely won't happen, at least not for everybody. But for whoever it can happen, I really hope it does. So thank you all for watching this video, and I hope you all have a great day.